Last week, viewers remember we were speaking with Dr. Gregory Ford and Cody Snodgrass. Dr. Ford is back. Hello, Dr. Ford. How are you today?
It's always good to be on your show, Jason. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. And always good to have you. We're joined today by a new guest. Dan Hennen is with us. Dan, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Dan's joining us from his website, uglytruth.info. And Dan, why don't you, since people on Crowdsource The Truth haven't seen you before, just give us a little bit of background on yourself, how you met Dr. Ford, and we're going to be talking today about, revisiting these allegations of weapons of mass destruction that were found in Iraq.
Well, I've run about 12 different pages, I guess, on Facebook relating to investigations on cold cases and investigations on deep state activity, one of which is the strange death of author Philip Marshall in Calaveras County, California. That's how I ran into Greg Ford. Philip Marshall was killed, and along with his two teenage children and the family dog, after he was going to be coming forward with a new transcript for a book on 9/11. He was a contract pilot working with Barry Seal in the mid 80s. And so once he was killed, we went out there to the location. I met up with Greg Ford once and went to the location and did some investigation. He was on site there when it first originally happened. And I've been following the case and set up a justice page for Justice for Philip Marshall and family on Facebook. And it currently has, I think it's 3,000 members on that group. So
wow.
Very interesting
I
case.
can't show the Facebook page, Dan, because I've been kicked off by the powers that be, so it's hard to get to.
I'm currently on a 30-day ban myself, so I can't get on either. But it's very interesting. A very interesting case. He was working very closely with the events on 9/11 and was a captain and a pilot and knew the specifics of on the failure, I guess, of that supposed Pentagon flight that did a 360 turn and down into the first level of the Pentagon. And Philip Marshall called bogus on that as a captain himself, that could not have been done by a beginner pilot with very little training on a Cessna at a flight training school. So he called bogus on that, wrote a couple books about it, but he was a contract CIA pilot along with working for Barry Seal back in the day in the mid 80s.
Right.
Back in the whole Arkansas scenario, after Barry Seal lost his license, it was taken away when he was busted on the Quaaludes charge. And so
you've got a ton of information, Dan, about all of these things. I mean, people might feel like we're going off a bit on a tangent, but the fact is all of these things are connected. And thank you for that background. It's, it's important, I think, for people to know how you and Dr. Ford have met each other. I think what we're going to focus on today, we do want to come back to Phil Haney, and to the extent that what Dr. Ford will share with us touches on what Phil Marshall knew. I'm getting all my Phils confused and all my people confused, but I think Dr. Ford wanted to talk today specifically about the origins of COVID-19. I know you're very concerned about that, Dan, and also, allegations that people heard back when they were talking about weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. Dr. Ford, can you fill us in a bit on what specifically we're going to talk about today when we transition over to our sponsor exclusive segment?
Okay. Well, let me see. Boy, I want everybody to understand that I did have a life before Iraq, and I definitely have a life after Iraq. Right. So, but now if when you read my book, you think, boy, this guy had no life except for Iraq. Well, that's not quite the case. But the thing is I also wanted to say to Dan also contacted me with the same issue, okay, about another Phil, okay. He contacted me originally on the Phil Marshall case, who was actually a neighbor of mine, who I didn't know, and who I'd been dancing around all through my career, but I never met him. and also Phil Haney, the Phil Haney story, which is quickly unfolding as something comparable. And the issue I bring up Phil Haney is that Phil Haney was a director of Homeland Security of counterterrorism, and that's what his specialty was. He was actually fluent in Arabic, and he was aware. He had been investigating a situation where he was actually following the development of some sort of biological issue, some sort of biowarfare issue, and he was trying to sound the alarm with that case. And when he was mysteriously, and Dan knows the exact same place also, where Phil Haney was actually, he was, now, let me see, how do I put this? He was living in his mobile home, and he was called about 3 o'clock in the morning and told by somebody very mysteriously, okay, he was told to show up to a park and ride spot. Yes, there's Phil right there. Park and ride spot on down the road from where he had parked his mobile home. And he did. He left at 3 o'clock in the morning, and it's very strange because, surprise, he was found dead with a shot by his shotgun, and he was shot in this term in his stomach, okay, alongside of his car. Okay, he'd driven his car to meet somebody, right down the road from where he was parked, and he had clearly got out of his car, exited his automobile, and he was shot in the stomach. And of course, the surprise, this thing happened with Phil Haney. It happened down the road from Phil Marshall's home, okay, in Tuolumne County.
Wow, that's a detail I'm not sure people were fully aware of.
Well, most people aren't. Now, I immediately responded, and I drove to the site, to the facility, and I was able to locate it because Phil Haney's brother-in-law, almost within a day or two, put a marker sign, a marker spot on the side of the road where this happened. And the thing is by the time I got there, it was about 2 days later, actually, 48 hours later, the roadbed alongside the roadbed had actually been excavated and completely removed and replaced with brand new roadbed. Okay, and no one is fessing up when I made the inquiry and the investigation. Who did that? Who actually removed the entire crime scene?
Wow.
And that include blacktop, that include roadbed, and the side of the road. It was all entirely excavated that quickly.
Wow.
So,
and Dr. Ford, isn't it true that the local sheriff initially said this was a suicide and then kind of backpedaled on that?
Yes. He said, yes, it was a suicide. And when his sister and Phil's brother-in-law, they got wind of it, they immediately called him and read him the riot act, okay, because of all the other unknown information that was going on in Phil's background. So they immediately changed it and to cause of death unknown.
Huh.
Right.
And it remains unsolved, isn't that right?
Yes, that's correct. Now, from what I can tell, looking at the site, and by the way, Phil Marshall's, I'm sorry, not Phil Marshall, Phil Haney's, I'm getting my two Phils mixed up here.
Yeah.
what it appears to be is that his sister did an investigation on his credit cards, immediately happening, and she found out that yes, indeed, there appears to be some sort of professional hit that was done. Okay, where he was called and told to meet at a certain place, certain time. He appears to have been shot. Okay, where he recognized the person. He walked up. Somebody walked up to the car, shot him in the shoulder. Okay, it was like a small caliber weapon. Shot him in the shoulder, and then pulled his body out and alongside the road, and then shot him again. Okay, with a shotgun. Okay, so the whole thing it's just one big mystery from beginning to end, and then the sister who was doing the forensic accounting, which is one of the luxuries I have with Dan, is that she followed the path that the gunman supposedly left the country with, and went to she reported to me Israel, where she found that for 2 separate evenings, Phil's credit card was used at the
please, if we could turn off anything that's going to ring or ding during the interview, it's so important.
I'm very
it really
sorry.
blows out people's ears. But
let's
before we go too far down this road, Dr. Ford, because this is what we're.
No, I can say this is that Jason, that was Snody, was Cody Snodgrass calling. Okay.
Oh, I thought he's at the doctor.
Well, he just called, and I turned it off. Oh, well, excuse me a moment. Let me answer.
Wait. Okay. Hang on. We can't do that. Barbara, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah.
If Dr. Ford, maybe if you could mute your mic. We're a little bit all over the place with this.
Oh, okay. Very sorry. Okay. Hey, we're on the show, Cody.
We're not technical whizzes here,
It's okay.
We're researchers.
How are you, Barbara? Welcome to the show. So we're going to bring this all together. It was certainly news to me that Phil Haney was looking into chemical weapons and biological weapons development, but that is where all of this information is going to come together when we continue in just 15 minutes.
Okay.
We're going to go in depth.
Yeah, we're on.
Right.
We're on
Could I say something in the meantime?
Give Jason a call, see if you can.
No, don't give Jason a call. Sorry, we can't arrange this on the show, Dr. Ford. Please just mute your mic and I'll call. I'll contact.
All right, I'll
Cody.
pass the word to him.
My goodness.
Thanks, buddy.
Okay, wait a minute. Don't pass any word to me here live on the show, please, Dr. Ford. Barbara, please.
I just wanted to remind people. I know you've had. I'm a member of the Lawyers Committee for 9/11 Inquiry, and I know that you've had other board members of our board. I'm on the board. You've had Dave Meiswinkle, and you've had Mick Harrison, and you've had also 2 members of our anthrax petition investigation and petition drafting committee, Professor Graham McQueen and Dr. Merle Nass, on your show. And I just want to remind people who've already seen those shows, and also in particular give a nutshell for those who didn't see that earlier show, that the Lawyers Committee for 9/11 Inquiry, and there on the screen you will see the executive summary of our petition that we filed on October 15th of this year, just a little bit ago, with all 535 members of Congress. And we officially filed it with the 2 presiding officers of the House, one of the House, one of the Senate, to officially basically serve it on Congress. And we are in this petition, we are calling for a reopening of the investigation of the weaponized anthrax letter attacks, in particular those against Senators Leahy and Daschle, which was a weapon of mass destruction, WMD bioweapon attack on our Congress, beginning shortly after the 9/11 attacks. And it's very possible that Phil Haney was investigating that. We know that Philip Marshall was not only investigating 9/11, he'd already written 2 or 3 books, I believe, 2 on 9/11, and he was completing the draft of his 3rd book on 9/11. And his sister, after he and his 2 children and his dog were assassinated, his sister and maybe Dan Hennen could mention that from the horse's mouth. I believe that Dan was the one that Philip Marshall's sister told that she understood that he was in possession or about to be in possession. I believe he was in possession of the then still highly classified top secret 28 pages of the first official 9/11 investigation report by the Joint House Senate Intelligence Committee. And I have reason to believe that he was actually illegally given those 28 pages by none other than Senator Bob Graham himself, who was meeting on the morning of 9/11 with a Pakistani general who had wired $100,000 to Mohammed Atta. So here we go. And that's the Philip Marshall story. And I also believe that it's very possible that Phil Haney, before his assassination, these were both assassinations of basically investigators, I believe, of the link between the 9/11 anthrax attacks and the, I believe, secret, ongoing Marshall type project, bioweapons research project in the United States that's illegal under the Biowarfare Convention.
Wow. So it's perhaps a circuitous link, but these things do all seem interrelated. And a lot of people don't even remember these anthrax letters from 9/11. Everyone was so preoccupied with the destruction that took place in New York and Washington, D.C. and Pennsylvania. But this was very important. Tom Daschle and Senator Leahy were the most outspoken opponents of the Patriot Act, which we've all lived under for the past 20 years approximately. And now, with the advent of COVID, Dan, it seems like yet another clamping down, an elimination of our rights under the basically pretext of some sort of really serious emergency. What can you add about this research that Phil Marshall was doing and how it might connect to Phil Haney and biological weapons?
Well, interesting enough, but yes, the anthrax came, after the attacks on 9/11. Leahy and Daschle were big opponents of the whole Patriot Act. They're the ones who received the anthrax in the mail to them, the deadly anthrax, to kill them, essentially what it was. We blamed it on some bad guys out there, some terrorists, but it was proven to be created in a lab and most likely sent out by our own CIA. Now, Phil Marshall was exposing the 9/11 connection with the Saudis and whatnot. Phil Haney was a whistleblower with the DHS, but as Greg Ford has mentioned, was possibly working on something else too with the government, these projects of the chemical warfare. So it could tie back in with that as well. And now we know with COVID we've been dealing with that also manufactured in a lab, not a random virus that's got out of control.
But do we know that, or is that alleged?
We know that.
I think it's fairly certain that it was created in a lab. Okay. The media will not say that, but they'll say that it came from a bat or some animal or something much like AIDS. But these things are created in a high-tech lab, much like the anthrax, in a defense laboratory, high-end, laboratory, and then set loose on the population to start taking away our rights and things like that. So that's how.
If I may add, the official story by China right now and by the Trump administration is that it was a laboratory chimera that leaked, in quotes, out of the Wuhan level 3 or 4 biosecurity lab.
And we've also heard from Dr. Judy Mikovits that frequently what happens when they're cultivating vaccines, they're using mammalian cell strains that themselves can have XMR, xenomorphic retroviruses in them. So there's all kinds of ways these interspecies chimeras can occur. Dr. Ford, so bring it together for us here in the last 5 minutes before we make the transition over to the sponsor exclusive segment. How do all these things tie together, and how do they tie together with things that you discovered in Iraq?
Okay, I'll try to condense this down here. Since I believe the phrase is the chickens have come home to roost. Okay, so what happened when I was in Iraq was this: now one of my sources, my prime sources, it turned out to be, and there is a picture of my source, my Iraqi source, who was a sheikh. He in my book. Okay, the pictures of him is in my book. All right. Now the situation is something like this. He came to me one afternoon, late afternoon, after I'd been up to a village just outside of Samara, and he came to me and he said, "Look, we need to have a long talk." And I said, "Great, that's wonderful. You know, this is an intel priority. People that want to talk, okay." And he said, "Okay, look, my father is the Sheikh of Salahuddin province." I said, "Yes, of course." And he said, it goes something like this: my father worked directly with Saddam Hussein. And of course, at this time in history, Saddam Hussein still was hiding in his spider hole. Okay. And Saddam Hussein probably could or did confirm this story, okay, to the Italian journalist that interviewed him for several weeks. All right. And then, of course, he was quickly executed. Saddam Hussein was. So the situation was something like this: the sheikh, my source, said, "Look, understand this. George H.W. Bush, okay, showed up here. This was a few years ago, okay, and he had a situation where he came to Saddam Hussein and said, okay, what we're going to do is create several laboratories with the original scientists and some of the old scientists from Germany and Holland. Okay, there were Dutch and German scientists, and we are going to make something called bioweapons, biological weapons, and that's, of course, that immediately caught my attention, because we're talking weapons of mass destruction, three types: chemical, nuclear, and biological. And he said, we are going to build those in Iraq, these laboratories in Iraq, because Iraq is a closed society. No information gets out. No light gets out of this society. And we need to have it that way. And so what we're going to do is we're going to build these laboratories, and the CIA is going to pay, entirely for the construction and also the development, using something that is brand new. It's called certain type. I'm sorry. The certain type of production for biological systems, not called COVID, but that was going to be the premier organism that they're going to use. They weren't going to use something like anthrax. They already had anthrax, but the main process was being built, and here, and Dan, refresh my memory. What was the process that they were going to use?
CRISPR?
Dan? Yes. Sorry, CRISPR, I was on mute.
Thank you.
Okay,
CRISPR. Yes.
So before we go into too many more details, Dr. Ford, we're going to need to break in just a moment to make the transition over to the sponsor exclusive segment. We'll get into many more details about the genetic engineering that you're telling us about, alleged to have occurred in Iraq. Real quickly before we go, do these biological labs that you're talking about, I mean, is this what Colin Powell was discussing at the UN when he showed this PowerPoint presentation prior to the U.S. invasion of Iraq?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
I can say that comfortably. Yes.
But Jason, before we go to the
yes.
Petraean, I'd just like to add, because I know that probably Greg will after the break, but it's important to get it in before for the viewers who only see this. And that is that if I recall correctly, and Greg can correct me if I'm wrong, that he's told me that later George H.W. Bush arranged for those actual biological weapons that were created in Iraq in those CIA laboratories with German and Dutch scientists, that they were then flown to China. Is that correct, Greg?
Yes, they were actually developed. This whole line of bioweapons were developed there using the brand new system, called CRISPR. And the thing is they had to develop these, and as my source was trying to say and trying to relate to, remember, he only spoke Arabic. He didn't speak English. So I had to get everything translated. But the thing was this. He said, yes. And when they finished the production in these 3 different laboratories, and each laboratory built a different aspect of these biological weapons, was they were to load these weapons up, and they were loaded up in styrofoam nodules, and they were loaded up. There was actually a couple of tons, of biological weapons, and they were intentionally loaded up onto two 747s that had been flown into Balad. These were unmarked 747s, no tail numbers, and they were flown out of Balad, the large airstrip there, just south of Samarra. And so they were flown from Balad, and they were flown directly to a place called Wuhan, China.
Wow. Dr. Ford, I'm going to pause you right there, because that's quite a bombshell you've just dropped. But we do need to make the transition over to our sponsor exclusive segment. I hope that viewers will join us to hear the rest of Dr. Ford's explanation here. Stunning information. We'll see everybody in just 2 minutes on subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth and patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. Join us over there. Thanks for watching.